So as a way of getting started, let's introduce everyone to the team. My name is Dennis Cassidy. I'm a regional sales director here at Ridge Security. I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts. I've been with Ridge for about 2 years now, but I've spent the last 10 years of my career working at various cybersecurity startups, namely penetration testing and application security as a focus. I'm also joined here by Kevin Sisney, our Director of Sales Engineering. Kevin, would you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dennis. My name's Kevin Sisney. I've been with Ridge for about a little over a year. I spent a little over 15 years doing endpoint security, vulnerability and risk management, blue teaming, purple teaming across multiple organizations. And I look forward to showing you how we tie RidgeBot in with Tenable today.
Thank you, Kevin.
And I'm in Wichita, Kansas, by the way.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So as a way of getting started, let's start with some of the pain points that security teams and security practitioners are facing with regard to vulnerability management these days. As we all know, the number of vulnerabilities in CVEs has only continued to go up over the last few decades. Vulnerability management tools have been around for quite some time now, but with that comes a lot of noise, false positives, and alert fatigue. Teams simply can't keep up with the number of vulnerabilities that surface day after day, week after week. And so focusing in on and prioritizing vulnerabilities has become a real challenge. You simply can't patch all of the vulnerabilities out there and determine, what's exploitable versus what is not, what is a false positive. And now, Kevin, I know in your history, you've been a practitioner in this space. Does this sound like something you were facing back in those days?
Absolutely, because there is just so much noise that comes out of vulnerability and risk management solutions. You don't know what to patch, what's exploitable, what not exploitable. And each one of the individual vulnerability and risk management tools has their own scoring mechanism, but they don't truly give you a kill chain analysis of the exploit, or any of that data to point your blue team in the right area of what do I patch first. That's always, because scoring is a very flawed mechanism. If we go just on scoring, things like Print Nightmare would still be left in the environment because they did not have a high score on initial discovery. So I face this day in and day out, sending out lists of thousands of vulnerabilities that needed to be patched without any real scenario based that would tell me what's exploitable, what's not, what should I patch first versus scoring and risk, any sort of calculation based on that. So that's why I like this solution, because everybody still needs a vulnerability scanner in their environment, because we need to see that across all of our targets and assets in the environment. And with agent-based, like Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7, that's a constant discovery of assets within the environment, and then allowing RidgeBot to sync those assets and those vulnerabilities and being able to exploit that will give your vulnerability and risk management team that priority list. Fix this first, then you can fall back on the scoring mechanism provided by Tenable.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And just to illustrate that further, the number of vulnerabilities keep growing year over year. If you look at the chart to the right, these numbers only continue to go up, but only 3 to 5% of vulnerabilities are actually exploitable. So how do teams keep up? How do they focus in on what's exploitable versus what is not? And that is the solution that we're going to present today. The combination of a tool like RidgeBot, which is an automated pen testing solution, how can it validate the security of vulnerabilities and exploits? And so before I hand it over to Kevin, just wanted to illustrate that RidgeBot can be operated as a standalone solution or integrated with some of the big three vulnerability management solutions, such as Tenable, Rapid7, and Qualys. Today, we'll be focusing on Tenable, where you'll be able to see exactly where RidgeBot was able to exploit a particular vulnerability and validate that it should be prioritized. With that, Kevin, unless you have anything else to add, I could hand it over to you to illustrate this and proceed with the masterclass.
I will, yes, I will do that. I want to touch on a couple of things, really quick. With Tenable VM and RidgeBot working together, you finally get a kind of a closed loop workflow that your team can actually use. With Tenable constantly giving you that complete visibility and vulnerabilities, and then RidgeBot gives you that validation of which ones are truly exploitable in your environment, which means we're going to reduce that noise, reduce the distractions, provide you a much sharper focus on cutting through that noise and remediating the things that attackers can actually use against you in real life scenarios. So with that being said, let me turn on or share my screen real quick.
Absolutely. And as you're doing that, I'll remind the group here that you can post your questions at any given time in the meeting chat or in the Q&A section.
Yep. Now, everybody should be able to see my screen. This is the RidgeBot platform. And we bring you into the task area. We can create new tasks. I can look at, report data. I can do different things from here. So the big challenge is I'm a Tenable shop, and my vulnerability and risk management team is telling me that I've got too much noise. We've got too many assets. So I've got a group of assets. I'm logged in my Tenable. I see some RidgeBot tags. That means that RidgeBot has denoted that these assets have exploitable vulnerabilities and has tagged them as such. So looking at this, I can already tell which one of my assets have issues if I'm on the blue or the vulnerability and risk management team. And then I can report on that based on those tags. So over at RidgeBot, let's take a look at this. So I'm going to go to my integrations page, and I'm going to kick off a Tenable scan. So I'm going to select Tenable Vulnerability and Risk Management. I am going to put my name on this one just to keep it flowing. And I'll need my access and my secret key from Tenable, which I can create through here, and I'll put those in. This is going to connect me to the Tenable cloud and give me access to that scan and vulnerability data. So once I have that in there, I can connect my Tenable instance through RidgeBot. Okay, my connection was successful. So now I need to synchronize the vulnerability and the asset database within Tenable. And that gives me that target list that I can select from. So let me click on that. It doesn't take very long. Once it makes that connection, I'm going to get some data up here that's going to tell me, how many assets we're looking at, how many vulnerabilities. You can see right here, it's starting to pull the asset data over. This only takes a couple of minutes. One of the biggest challenges in vulnerability management today is that noise. And teams are getting overwhelmed with long lists of remediations, with vulnerabilities, and they don't clearly know what has been or where that risk is. You can see here my assets and my vulnerabilities have synced. Now I can go and port those assets. I can see that RidgeBot has brought in the Tenable tag on everything that we have looked at from Tenable. So that tells me of what I've scanned with Tenable. I'm going to go ahead and select these Metasploitable targets because they make good targets for this particular demonstration. I'm going to click OK. It automatically loaded my targets. I can run it now, schedule it to run once. If I'm doing a weekly cadence, I probably want to set this after my Tenable scans, so I make sure and see that fresh asset and vulnerability data. I'm just going to run it once. I'm going to leave my speed alone. let my stealth level do what it needs to do. I don't need to connect to Jira or ServiceNow. I'm not going to make any changes. Doing a full scan, all ports. Going to leave everything as it is in my testing config. And then when I'm ready to hit go, I can hit run. And now I have fully synchronized set of targets, assets, and vulnerabilities from Tenable. And as that runs, with Tenable VM providing the broad vulnerability coverage and RidgeBot validating what's actually exploitable in your environment, you're going to get that closed loop process that cuts through all of the noise. And it's not just another integration. This is a workflow that your team can actually use on a day-to-day basis to prioritize the risk coming out of your Tenable environment. So let's go in and look at one that has already ran. This is a fairly identical test. I have 6 total targets, 6 alive targets. And RidgeBot was able to validate exploits across all of these 6 targets. I've got an attack surface of 965 and 61 exploitable risks that I have validated from my Tenable platform. I can go look at my topology and see very quickly from a RidgeBot standpoint, my IPs that we were scanned, their attack surfaces, any open port, any vulnerabilities, and then my exploitable risk that RidgeBot was able to validate, detect, validate those vulnerabilities, and also exploit them. Looking at my task summary, we ran about 31,000 jobs against these six targets, We validated and detected the 326 vulnerabilities, and of those, we were able to exploit 61 of them. Looking at my attack surface, which is another really great thing that RidgeBot does, gives me all of those open ports, the services and the applications, any URLs tied to these particular targets, their labels and parameters. And looking at that vulnerability table, I see all of my exploitable risk first, and then I get into that remediation and mitigation advice against the other vulnerabilities contained within these 6 targets that are not exploitable. Going to the risk table, I see multiple poll kit escalations via SSH. I get my evidence of the remote shell command. Again, credential disclosures. We left a test account for Vagrant on this particular asset. So on and so forth. So my SOC, my red team, my cyber team has access to RidgeBot. They can see this, they can track it, and they can look at that risk. Now, as this runs, on my Tenable side, once RidgeBot is done on these 6 assets, and we have determined that RidgeBot has been able to exploit those, we're going to tag it with either RidgeBot detection or RidgeBot validation. RidgeBot detection is we have detected it, validated it, means that we have exploited that asset. So now we have tagged these assets within Tenable with this RidgeBot tag. Now my vulnerability and my risk management team, my blue team, my administrators can run reports based on this tag. So in my report template, very easily, I've created my RidgeBot exploitable. I can go back to my reports, look at those results, look at my completed reports, and then get those reports to my team to look at. Let me make this a little bigger team. So I ran this scan yesterday, and I looked for that RidgeBot validation or RidgeBot detection tag, and now I have a full rundown of my Tenable issues. My vulnerability and risk management team can now pivot and patch these 6 targets or assets in the environment. And then I can rescan after my next Tenable scan. And if I've got it scheduled, I'm doing those on a cadence. So I have this closed loop now with, Tenable providing that broad vulnerability coverage and then RidgeBot being able to follow it up and trying to exploit that coverage. I can then report on my SOC team can now report on the RidgeBot reports, take a look at that particular data, and then follow along with the vulnerability and risk management team to see what those exploits look. I can even combine the RidgeBot reports with those Tenable reports so that I can make sure that everybody sees the kill chain analysis, everything going on with these particular types of assets, my web fingerprints, open ports. And then I get into that risk with any evidence, and then my kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to exploit this. So if my vulnerability and risk management team doesn't exactly know what's going on, I can give them that kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to do that and give them that extra remediation advice based on that. And once I get through all of the exploit information, RidgeBot's still going to give me that remediation advice, just like Tenable does, on how to fix the rest of the vulnerabilities. And then we can also get our web app, our risk management team, or what have you, our exploit team, that attack surface analysis of all of these assets as well. So by combining this rich contextual pen test data with my Tenable data, I get that full coverage. And now my vulnerability team doesn't have any answers. My SOC team, my purple team, my red team has a full understanding of what's going on in the environment. My purple team has their path to fix what they need to fix first, their prioritization. And then we've got that Tenable data that I can reinforce with my RidgeBot data. Dennis, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think this is a great illustration of where teams should focus their time. If RidgeBot was able to validate that a finding was truly exploitable, you can focus your efforts there and sleep better at night, knowing that RidgeBot was able to give you that kill chain analysis and help you focus your efforts on a true positive, an issue that must be addressed.
Correct. And the ultimate goal is to simplify, validate, and close the loop between detection and remediation. And hopefully very quickly we've been able to show you how you can do that with a very efficient, very easy to set up closed loop workflow that ties in the vulnerability and risk management team to the SOC team, the purple team to the red team, blue teaming, things to that nature. So what we're really looking to do with this is cut through the noise, give you actionable prioritization and threat intelligence to reduce the risk in your environment through a very efficient integration with RidgeBot and Tenable. Does anybody are we doing question and answer, Dennis? I kind of forgot.
Yeah, we did have one question. Will RidgeBot try to exploit over the external side, or will it do it internally?
It will do both, depending on where you're scanning it from. If you have a RidgeBot internally, it's obviously going to do that. If you have one facing external, it's going to come through the perimeter and try to test that asset. Did that answer the question?
I think it did.
Okay. And as you can see, this is going along pretty quick. This should take about the same time that Tenable takes to scan those assets. It's very similar, but this is a very effective closed loop integration that allows you to cut through the noise of what Tenable finds, because Tenable finds everything, just like Rapid7 and Qualys does, and lets you cut to that exploitable risk in the environment, then allows you to fall back to the scoring mechanism, true risk, real risk, what have you, as far as the other technologies are concerned.
Any other questions from the group? We have a question. How does this differ from using EPSS scoring to predict exploitability, Kevin?
That is a great question. So EPS is a prediction. It is, I'm looking for a prediction of what's going to be exploited, either based on attack vectors, CVEs, what have you. This integration actually gives you the exploit. It's not a percentage. This is a fact that this vulnerability is exploitable. Here is the kill chain analysis, the evidence, and how to fix it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us in today's masterclass. Actually, Kevin, we did have one question from the group. As far as for vulnerability scanners that are not directly integrated to RidgeBot, can you manually upload results of other scanners within RidgeBot? Is that a scenario that exists today?
We can do third-party validation. It's not the same as these direct integrations with Tenable, Rapid7, and Qualys, but it is doable.
All right.
All right. So the bottom line, less noise, more focused, real-world exploit validation, faster, smarter remediation. And that's the goal.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. The recording will be shared within the next day or so. And we appreciate your time here today.